Hey everybody, this is Perch, and today we've got a number of future state titles coming out. Now, in basic, for all the fuss and all the commentary and all the news sites and all the worry and everything else, future state reads like kind of what I'd said all along. It's some Elseworlds-ish type stories of what could happen in the future of DC, not unlike Future's End. I think the sticking point, and now having read Death Metal #7 and kind of all that, it makes sense now. When you say Elseworlds or you say kind of possible future, then the marketing or the thrust behind DC right now is that everything matters. So when you say like Elseworlds or you say possible future, the answer is no, that's wrong. These stories count. These stories matter. And I think here's where it feels like I'm often speaking a different language in the sense that the stories always mattered to me, in the sense that, you know, when I read an Elseworlds comic, when I read like way back when with Gotham by Gaslight or Red Sun or comics like that, they mattered. To me, they mattered. I was the reader. I was the person who enjoyed them. So the idea that they didn't really quote unquote count because they weren't part of DC continuity, it didn't mean anything to me. And I think that's a little bit of what Scott Snyder and kind of DC's trying to say in general with Death Metal is like all these stories count. But I'm not sure who's being talked to here, because I think most readers, if they like the story, they enjoyed the story. The fact that it may or may not be part of quote unquote, you know, real continuity, I don't know that that bothers many people. A lot less than I think people think. What clicked for me in reading the Future State books, and we are going to get into the ones that came out this week in just a second, but what clicked for me is that just like Crisis on Infinite Earths and the other times DC is rebooted, they've often said, you know, we are going to clean up our continuity. It's too difficult for people to understand. And the fans and the customers are like, no, we understand it fine. We were not confused. Like, nobody was confused. Why did you do this? And it doesn't mean like the stories that came after that were bad. That, you know, there are plenty of enjoyable stories there. John Byrne's run on a number of DC characters were great. What would come later with Doom Patrol was wonderful. There's lots of great stories out there. But it always felt like DC, the company, and many of the creators involved in it were more concerned with this idea of continuity's too tricky. And in this case, with Death Metal and with ultimately Future State and the new state of DC, it feels like, once again, the company and a lot of the creators are saying, we're going to prove to everybody that the stories matter. And the readers are like, hey, we're already there. You know, just because White Knight exists in some other, some other take of Batman, it doesn't mean it's less important. It's a good story. We read it. We're happy. It doesn't need to have some weird dotted line into core DC continuity. It can just exist. And so as we get into these stories now for Future State, they're all kind of, you know, potential futures, glimpses of what may happen in comics. And you know, here's the thing. Some of the comics will connect into these stories when we revert back to current time. Some won't. Does that matter? Not really. I mean, is the story good? It doesn't need to connect, I guess from my point. And when I talk to others, that's what I hear as well. But we've got, regardless of all that, we have basically 6 titles out for Future State this week. We have Harley Quinn. We have Superman of Metropolis, we have Swamp Thing, The Flash, The Next Batman, and Wonder Woman. And just off the offset, the comic, I've read all these now, the comic I enjoyed the most was probably Wonder Woman. I think it told an interesting story. The comic I enjoyed probably the least. I mean, it's a toss-up maybe. Several of these stories are kind of shallow. Harley Quinn is pretty shallow. Swamp Thing is okay. It reminds me of Lemire's work a little bit. Superman of Metropolis, again, it's kind of a pretty basic cut and dry story. The Flash, there's something wrong there's something I didn't like about reading that. And The Next Batman, it had some issues. Probably the stories I enjoyed the least out of this bunch were The Flash and The Next Batman. But let's get into each real quick. So first off, a Wonder Woman. It's a very beautiful looking comic. I think Jolie Jones does a really good job putting this whole thing together. It looks nice. It's got a lot of dynamic parts of the page. Jordi Belair is the colorist and does a really good job with making this comic look really stunning and really unique. Yara Flor's face changes kind of dramatically at different times in the comic, and that gets to be a little annoying. There's parts where the mole kind of seems to rove around on her face, but in general, this comic looks very nice. It's a mythological type story of going into the underworld, and it's she's a hothead. Yara Flor is all that. I can see his personality getting pretty annoying over time, relatively quickly, but it's fun. It's a fun little book. Not a lot to it. I mean, basically, we move from point A to point B. Again, the personality of Yara Flor may get frustrating over times, but Jolie Jones does a really good job of incorporating kind of the art into the story. The expressions there's some neat stuff going on, and lots of people are going to enjoy the ample amount of thigh and butt shown in this comic. I mean, look, let's be honest. Lots of people are gonna double tap on that, so I might as well get it out of the way. But it's a fun little book. It makes me want to learn more about this world, what's going on here. I think there's some interesting things that we were showing here. I hear that this character is going to get into Brazilian politics and kind of all of that. And I would say it's a shame. I hope that's not so much the case, because it is her fighting mythological beasts and going into these different areas is entertaining. I'd like to see more of that. It feels fresh and good, and I would rather see more of that than, getting into kind of her in the real world. So, for what it's worth. The Harley Quinn book is stylistically, it's very pretty. The art and the coloring looks very good. This is probably, Tamara Bonvillain does a couple books. This is probably the better one. The other one she did does not, it's pretty muddy. This one seems to be at least kind of what was inspiring her. This is a relatively cut and dry story. Harley Quinn's been captured. Jonathan Crane wants her to go help kidnap or capture other criminals for the magistrate. It's this idea of kind of a cyberpunky Harley Quinn, working to, within the confines of this new Gotham and this new police state, fascist Gotham City. Lots of neon colors, lots of kind of blurry effects and everything else. The plot lines of Jonathan Crane and Harley Quinn and why everybody's doing these things doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense, but that's fine. Putting Roman Black Mask as the main villain ties it into the movie, which is fine too. But this is relatively, Harley Quinn does some stuff. There's not a lot of depth to the story, but it's fun enough. Superman of Metropolis is. This is basically the story of it looks very pretty. I think in this case, John Timms does a really good job of putting this comic together. It's got a lot of detail, a lot of complexity. There's some interesting looking characters. We've got this Brainiac orb with a bunch of mouths on it. That's pretty nifty, so that's cool. And there's some stuff in here that's different. It basically highlights a bunch of people acting stupid. So Jonathan Kent is tricked into putting Metropolis into a bottle, into a Brainiac globe, and Supergirl shows up and she is tricked / manipulated into fighting Jonathan Kent, and all of this just allows Brainiac to skedaddle away with with Metropolis. Anyway, it's a relatively, again, it's a everybody makes mistakes kind of story. It's fine. It looks very pretty. Lots of interesting stuff going on. Does it really do much for any of the characters? Not really, but that's okay. And then it has some backup stories. It has the new version of Mr. Miracle, who is Shiloh Norman, which is a nice nod back to some of the Grant Morrison work, and that's cool. It's he can't figure out how to escape from the bottled city, and then there's some shenanigans going on around the town. You don't get a lot from this story, but it's quick. And then we get into the Guardian and kind of more unrest within the city. Unfortunately, these two backup stories and the unrest going on without the city clash horribly with the complete overarching, the magistrate is in Gotham and causing problems. And so as a result, they lose a lot of their punch. They seem like watered down versions of what's going on in the Batman book. Swamp Thing is, it's again, if you like kind of Lemire's Swamp Thing and some of those, we get the New Society of Swamp Things and his family and kind of how humanity has been driven away, and there's not a lot here as well. This comic feels like this glimpse into a potential future that's really going to get picked up in the limited series that's coming in March from Swamp Thing. So this kind of looks like an in game. There's some interesting stuff here. It's not bad. I think the appearance of Obsidian there at the end is interesting, and that's kind of cool. But this is, if you're a DC Heroes fan, you love just DC Heroes book, this is going to be the one that is not your cup of tea, so to speak. But if you like more of kind of the arcane side of things, this idea of the Swamp Thing mythology and kind of that whole world, if you missed the Swamp Thing solo book from 10 years ago or so, this is probably a book you'll enjoy. There's some stuff in here, but it's some interesting art. The Flash tells a relatively straightforward story of the Flash family needing to team up to take down Wally West, who's possessed and murdering people. He's just kind of zooming around murdering people, and there's again a relatively straightforward story here. Wally is bad. The Flashes must try and stop him. Wally stays one step ahead. At the end, Barry Allen, goes into his closet of weapons and things he's taken from villains over the years to help to hunt down Wally and stop him. And so that it's Dale Egglesham is doing the art. Egglesham, I should say, is doing the art, and it's fine. It's but this feels kind of like it. The problem with this story is that we've had evil Wally, and Wally may not be in control like way too much over the last 3 years. So even reading this story, you feel kind of tired. The emotional beats of a member of the Flash family who dies, and kind of the family's in desperate straits and everything else. It's like I've read this story 10 times over the last 2 years is what it feels like. There are unique stuff going on here, but this title feels like the biggest repeat of anything, whereas everything else is giving us some new comics. But the Flash feels the most tired, kind of out the gate. Then finally, we got the next Batman. This is a really big issue with a lot of things going on in it. This introduces us to Jace Fox. Don't call him by his real name. It's Jace Fox, and it's okay. It's a fairly by the number. The challenge with this story is it's trying too hard to kind of showcase that this is a real Batman. Like it feels a little bit like it's not confident in itself. We get scenes of Batman kind of taking down criminals, and we get some a lot of bits about I'm saving your life, even if it's not worth saving. And, the police are against Batman because this new magistrate has taken over Gotham. And then there's some drama with the city, and there's a Bane gang that runs around shooting people for some reason. And overall, it just, there's nothing inherently wrong about this story. It's fine. It goes a little bit too heavy into trying to prove that this is I'm not just Batman, I'm the better Batman, and it's it's fine. I mean, what are you gonna do? But Gotham's bad. He's out running around trying to save people. There's probably an interesting hook here. I have some doubts that this story is going to be told well in 4 issues. They're doing some world building. They're setting some things up, but we're never really going to get to the question of, in a lot of detail, of why did Jace Fox do this? Why did he start to do the mask? Why is he determined to be a better version of Batman? What is? I mean, there's just we're getting this glimpse of the future, and then I guess we'll get back to the past and we'll build up this character. But it kind of, the comic sets you up a little bit too much in the, there's a lot of scenes of people just walking away in this comic. Like, I'm walking away. I'm walking determinedly into the distance. I'm running determinedly into the distance. I'm waving behind my back as I walk into the distance. There's a lot of, this comic just feels, I'm less excited about learning who this Batman is and why he's doing this kind of stuff, and why is the Fox family going on here. It's surprisingly, I guess the best way to put it is John Ridley is doing this comic. John Ridley is a very, very talented creator and has some good writing chops. And this feels very by the numbers. It's a lot less inspired and original than I would expect from Ridley. We do get an outsider story in this comic that's pretty long. Like the outsider story, we get pretty much a full comic of story. And that there's some interesting stuff here, a lot with Katana and the Signal. So that's okay. And then we get the Arkham kind of, the Arkham criminals who are trying to fight back against the magistrate. It's weird. I mean, anytime you got Two-Face and he's, teaming up, this isn't the Suicide Squad, but it's kind of here. The idea of like, hey, Gotham is a problem and there's a lot of drones and we're going to draw lots of drones in the sky. And there's like half these comics out this week have drones in them. And it's a little bit less of an impactful story than I think it wanted to be. Overall, I think, Wonder Woman is a great comic. It's entertaining. Harley Quinn looks very nice, has some nice style to it. Superman and Metropolis, it's a pretty basic story, but it's got some good art and things going on. Swamp Thing is a nice nod. Probably Flash and the Batman feel the most clunky is the wrong word. Just like with Flash, it feels like you read this story before. With Batman, you really do get the sense that there's been so much mining of Batman as a property that we've got another Batman and he's doing some Batman stuff. You get kind of exhausted just coming into it. The other book that is out is Generation Shattered. I'll probably cover that separately. That's an interesting little book, but definitely kind of the early calls of this is DC's Avengers Forever is right on the money. That's absolutely what you're getting here with Generation Shattered. But it's a fine looking book. It suffers a little bit from a wide variety of artists that kind of get crammed into the picture all at once. But in terms of new comics, I don't know. You're seeing stuff on Twitter of Andy Corey is saying, this is finally what it means when editors are unrestrained to give us the vision they wanted. I mean, okay, if you say so. I always find that a very weird comment, especially from Corey, who doesn't work with the company anymore. It's like, here are some amazing comics when people are allowed to actually be creative. It's like, wait a minute, didn't you used to work for that company, and weren't you one of the people who held people back from being creative? I mean, you're gone and comics are better. Is that what you're saying? Weird. Okay. These are comics. Is it a bold, new, amazing direction? I mean, sure. We've seen future versions of people before. It's fine. There's some promise here. I think, again, Wonder Woman has some promise. Harley Quinn's kind of a story. It's gone and forgotten. There's some interesting hooks here. We'll see where they go. But overall, the Future State books so far, they are absolutely not the epic woke disaster that people were pointing out. Although I'm sure people hunt and pick between the different stories and pages to find just the right panels to make it all bad. But you don't see like activists running amok everywhere. These are comic stories, and they feel like comic stories. If anything, it feels like just kind of a comic story you'd expect out of DC. Last year or 10 years ago or 20 years ago. It just kind of feels like that. And that's not a bad thing. Maybe, all new, all different isn't really what you have to have every time. You just have to tell good stories. And then there's a couple of good stories in here. So that's my opinion anyway. What do you think? Leave a comment below. Let me think, what of these new comics, what of the Future State comics did you read? What'd you like? What'd you hate? Let me know. Like and subscribe. Hey, thanks for being part of the channel, and thanks for listening.